think it is that the mainstream medicine industry, if you like, worldwide, treats illness, and that's the success, rather than preventing illness?
Well, clearly I think everybody knows the answer to that one, and it's money. Patient cured is customer lost, and where would the pharmaceutical industry be, where would the surgeons be, where would everybody be if they didn't have any clients? So prevention would be bad for business.
So what's your theory on what prevention would be?
Well, it's simple. Our ancestors got it right. Over the millennia, our ancestors figured out how to do everything right. There were obviously changes, milestones along the way. I mean, clearly our ancestors, it would seem, were hunter-gatherers at some point, which would have meant in winter, for instance, in a colder climate, you're very restricted on what you can eat. There's not a lot growing in England, for example, for many months of the year. And that means fish. There's always fish in the sea. It means meat. And there's a lot of evidence to show that our ancestors were essentially omnivores. But let's say that we're wandering through the forest, and now spring has arrived and there are eggs for the first time. Children hunting for Easter eggs, what could be more fun? Suddenly it's been months since you last had eggs for breakfast, and now you've got opportunity to eat eggs. That would be great. Then you might stumble across the wild strawberries somewhere in the forest. Now, what are you going to do if you stumble across the wild strawberries in the forest? Well, you're going to eat them all. You're going to be gorging on them. And then maybe you'd find some wild blueberries or whatever. But I'm not sure that you would stop and go, wow, there's some kale. Let's chew it. I'm just not sure about that. But let's say we've discovered fire, and we've been eating we've been able to catch something. We got together as a group and we caught some animal or some bird or something. I think probably suddenly smelling tasty bird on the fire, I believe that we sat around the fire, we ate whatever would cook on a fire, and we inhaled lots and lots of charcoal in the form of dust. And charcoal, natural charcoal, not activated, natural charcoal is C60. And you probably know there's a huge surge of interest in C60 after the Nobel Prize was won over a quarter of a century ago, because if you're lucky enough to be a rat, a laboratory rat, C60 can virtually double your lifespan. Now, I don't want to meddle with nano C60 myself, but C60 in the form of charcoal, somebody's got a stomach upset, give them charcoal after a meal, almost certainly settle their stomach upset. So our ancestors had it right. Then our ancestors discovered how to make pots and things and cook things. They probably discovered how to make bread. Now, the moment we were tied to grains, that was when we stopped being hunter-gatherers and were enslavable. Right? The grain-led societies from Egypt, wherever, anywhere they had granaries. But they knew how to deal with the grains. What you'd do is you'd let the mixture of water and flour prove, which meant you left it for about 7 or 8 hours for all the phytates and so on to get neutralized. Sourdough does that well. But if it was yeast, you'd let it rise, you knock it down, you let it rise, you knock it down. And they used to do that and then start baking at 4 in the morning. But now, bread, for example, isn't made the old-fashioned safe way. They do it in a hurry, in a batch, 10 minutes or something, rather than doing the full 8-hour process and then baking it slowly. It's just done differently these days, and people wonder, well, when I was young, I'm 65, I don't remember anybody for decades having a problem with wheat or rye or gluten. Unheard of. Now, in the old days, taste was right up there. But with modern farming, taste is on the floor. What's important is how big, how fast, right, and how sweet. So in hybridizing the carrot from being a purple-colored vegetable to an orange one, it went from being not very sweet at all to really sweet. Potatoes went to being rich in nutrients, very low glycemic load, up to the current giant potato, which is no longer multicolored and knobbly, but huge, relatively low on nutrition. With many, back in 1930-something, the American government was already publishing figures saying that nobody could survive eating modern food, this is in the 1930s, because of the depletion of the soils. through the Dust Bowl, and through the application of chemicals and fertilizers and herbicides and fungicides and insecticides and you name it. So they've killed the life in the soil. And so having no life in the soil, where are all the birds that used to be when they ploughed the soil? They're gone. The young people don't know. What the young people don't know is that when I was young, or let's say 30 odd years, I'm still young, 30 odd years ago, if I were to drive from here to London, I would have to stop and clean my windscreen because of all the dead insects on the windscreen. And at night, and everybody old enough knows, at night you had to stop and clean your headlights because you couldn't see anymore. There were so many thousands and thousands of dead insects on your windscreen, on your headlights, like Armageddon. Now you're lucky to find one dead insect. So the young people don't know. Where have all the insects gone? It's like 10,000 to 1. Where have all the birds gone? Young people don't know. The bats, where have they gone? There is good news out there, because everything can be changed, but the best news is about the bees and shungite. Did you know that whereas there's been this mass colony collapse, as we know, worldwide, they've discovered you stick shungite dust, which is C60, right? Shungite's made of C60. It's an electrically conductive metal that changes the structure of water, and we're water. They put this by the entrance to beehives, and the bees will choose to rub up against the shungite, and beekeepers are saying, well, last year we had colony collapse, this year we reckon we've got 5 million bees. Shungite is correcting what's ever been wrong with the bees. So, and we need to do the same with our bodies. You know, we have been damaged just like the bees have. There are electromagnetic frequencies out there, there's poisonous food. You know, an example that I like to give is if somebody came to us and said, look, here's this 1-year-old baby, and here is this $20 million racehorse, right? We're going to leave both with you, and we want you to look after them for a while. And they disappear in a puff of smoke. Now we've got this 1-year-old baby and a racehorse. What are we going to feed it? Right? Well, I might think that oats are a good idea. You might think that avocado, yeah, who knows? But we're going to decide on one thing. It's a baby. It's a $20 million horse. We're going to feed both the best, right? You don't want to poison the baby, do you? You don't want to poison the $20 million racehorse. When did you last have a meal that wasn't poisoned? When did you last have something that you knew was organic, that had never had been sprayed with anything? It was an old variety. It hadn't been poisoned in any way whatsoever. When was the last time you didn't eat poison for breakfast, lunch, dinner? When was the last time you didn't feed your kids, your granny, your mum, whoever, poison? We have to take the decision not to go the corporate route and not to accept poison. Not poison shampoo. Are you eating your shampoo? Of course you are. Rubbing it into those wide open pores in the bath, you're eating your shampoo. You don't want to do that. It might go into the brain, your heart. We are poisoning ourselves all day long, and it's got to stop. And all we've got to do is stop buying it.
You've spoken about the soil. So years ago, before a lot more radiation, before spraying of soil, you'd have got a lot of nutrition from the soil that you don't get today.
Yep.
What are the keys that you think you don't get from food now that you have to supplement with?
Right. Well, the big one is magnesium. Right. Magnesium is at the centre of chlorophyll, so it's in all plants. However, are all plants healthy these days? You can grow a plant with phosphorus, potassium and nitrogen, NPK. Those 3 chemicals will grow a plant. But actually plants, just like us, need hopefully every mineral going. But if you spray a plant with Roundup, Monsanto, Bayer's herbicide, the way it works, the way it kills weeds is it stops them getting minerals from the soil and they die. So the Roundup Ready, the modified foods that don't get killed by the Roundup, they're still depleted in minerals even though they look all right maybe. So we need to realize that magnesium is being wiped from food and it's being wiped through stress. We are very stressed, not just the electricity bill, not just the mobile phone, the cordless phone, not just our families, the fact that we're having all our income stolen by governments, not just because, I could go on. It's because stress reduces your magnesium levels. How you cope with stress is burning magnesium. So as we burn magnesium to cope with the stress, our bodies become more acidic as we burn up the alkalinity that is magnesium. And if you're running an acidic body, the electron transfer into the cells changes and you're not as healthy as you should be. Let's say you're eating an animal product and the animal product has been fed grains, not grass-fed, for example, then that animal is going to be ill. We are eating poisoned vegetables, poisoned fruit, and diseased animals. Yes, the vet says they're fine. Okay, they're on the edge of fine. I know a farmer who says if they feed their chickens any more than such and such a day, they fall over and break their legs because they're carrying too much weight. Animals are being bred to an inch of their lives, and farmers often tell me, I wouldn't eat the supermarket food that I'm growing. We've got our own patch around the corner. I'm not going to eat that poisoned stuff. And if I want to be in business, I've got no choice but to do it the way I'm told. Otherwise, I'll be out of business. And governments are now putting in such horrendous regulations where the creameries are having to shut down. So they haven't got the money to compete with the big dairies with the new regulations where they've got to have extra hygienic. It's been going on for hundreds of years, nobody's died, but now everything's changed and it's always in favour of the big corporates. So we've got to stop shopping at the big corporates. You know, they make it really obvious. You know, the supermarkets are called by the names they are. You know, there's Aldi, Deathco. People go to Waitrose and wonder why they're Waitrose. You know, how obvious do you need to make it? Don't go to Aldi if you want food. Yes, they sell some organic stuff. They made a big fuss about selling organic stuff, but when I go into my local one, which I do just occasionally, just have a look around, I filmed in there to see whether I could find anything that wasn't poisonous. Before they went organic, I thought, I'll see if I can film one product that isn't in some way poisoned with some chemical or another, in my opinion. They threw me out before I could find a product. Anyway, so magnesium. Everybody's low on magnesium, and people need to understand the symptoms of magnesium deficiency, which can be anxiety, panic attacks, muscle cramps, twitches, menstrual cramps, heart palpitations, heart problems in general, constipation. The list is huge. Osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, rheumatism. You know, it's endless. Slip discs. I could go on. Stomach issues, sleeping poorly. Magnesium is at the core of everything. It's the number one mineral, and we're all low on it. I've tested thousands of people, even people who are taking magnesium, often they're low on it as well. It's rare that I get somebody who's not low on magnesium. And what difference does it make when you suddenly take magnesium? All the difference in the world, right? Life-saving for many people. What happens if somebody's having a heart attack? They get wheeled into the emergency room. What do? They inject you with magnesium because it releases the muscles and stops the heart attack. Epsom salts, that's what they give you. Inject it. Stops a heart attack. But they don't teach doctors about magnesium. Where would all the heart patients be if they taught the doctors about magnesium? What about all the other conditions? If they just taught magnesium / hospitalizations, if they realized that vitamin D is crucial if you want to avoid cancer, depending on what statistics you're looking at, people with the highest vitamin D compared to the lowest have up to 76% less cancer incidence. All you've got to do is go down to the equator. Way less cancer there because they're getting sunshine. Vitamin D, you know. Vitamin C. The first time I ever saw terminal cancer reversed was at the advice of Dr. Linus Pauling, and he advised somebody I know to take 35 grams of vitamin C every day in divided doses. They'd been given 12 weeks to live with the cancer that had come back for the second time. They did not die from cancer. They cleaned up their diet. They took 35 grams of vitamin C, and you know, they obviously could lower that after a while until the cancer had gone. And when they did die, 20 odd years later, they did not die from cancer, right? So nutrition is everything. You pick a vegetable that's got vitamin C in, a fruit that's got vitamin C in, and you ship it from wherever to the warehouse, to the supermarket, to your fruit bowl. The minerals are all there. Minerals are not damaged by time or heat, but vitamins are. How many vitamins are left in your lemon? Well, maybe not very many at all. But we think we're doing all right, tastes all right. You can actually use a refractometer, which you can buy for 12 quid or so on eBay, to test how good your fruit is. There are ways to figure it out, but the best way is either to grow it yourself, and I teach people how to sprout seeds and pulses. You know, you can carry home a kilo of seeds or pulses for sprouting, and let's say it's chickpeas. So I sprout the chickpeas, I soak the chickpeas 24 hours, then rinse them and just let them sprout, rinsing them a couple of times a day. Now I've got 3 kilos of chickpeas, only paid one kilo's worth of money. Let's say I've got mung beans, I sprout them. Now let's say I've got 4 kilos of mung beans from one. We call sprouted mung beans bean sprouts. You can sprout your own salad, you can sprout chives, you can sprout beetroot, you can sprout celery seeds, onion seeds. You know, you can put together a salad that you've made yourself in your flat, without a garden, without a balcony. You just sprout your own stuff. You can have live food. In that cupboard I've got jars of dried pulses and seeds. I could probably live for 6 months on fresh food if I had to. And it costs me almost nothing, because those sort of foods are cheap. There are companies that sell seeds for sprouting. I'm not suggesting you go to the garden centre and pay 2 quid for 25. You can get thousands for a fiver. Lots of companies selling organic, super important it's organic seeds and pulses for sprouting. You know, it makes food cheap and available. You know,
everything that you're saying is about reducing dependency on society, on medical system and so on, whereas they obviously want the opposite. They want people to be dependent on it, because as you said at the start, you're a customer for life for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the main reason that you think that we constantly hear politicians say, particularly when in this country talk about the NHS, when they say we're treating more people than before, they're talking about that like it's a positive thing?
Yeah, and exactly, they're lost in exactly what you say. You know, they should be saying we're treating less people every year because we're winning with the health challenge. You know, we're getting there, but they're not. It's getting worse because drugs are not the answer. Nobody's low on a drug. It's just a farce. Yes, drugs can save a life occasionally. You know, the emergency room doctors, I've got a lot of time for them. Their job is to help you, to save you. But to think that you can get to health by being drugged, it's completely impossible. The idea that last year's flu virus or mumps virus or whatever could possibly be effective against the new mutated this year's variety. You know, I go into the doctor's office and it says, the flu season is coming, get a vaccine. Hang on, what is the flu season? You know, what is it? There is no flu season. It's not where the flu germs have been hiding and come out and bite people on the bottom when it gets cold. It's a lack of sun season. So they're misleading people. There is no flu season. It's a lack of sun season. You know, a year's supply of vitamin D would cost less than €5, €5, £5. It's so cheap. A year's worth. You know, so what if they gave vitamin D to everybody free? What if they handed out some vitamin C, a good multimineral, not a fake one, not a synthetic vitamin multimineral. Most of the ones that are one a day, people don't realise they could be more harm than good. One a day, that's not from food, that's going to be synthetic. You know, if they just did prevention, if the NHS, the National Health Service, meant what it says, we would be analysing people's nutritional status, because it's easy to test for vitamin D deficiency, and then it's easy to test a month later, see whether you've, after supplementing or getting more sun, whether you've got it right. It would be so easy to basically test everybody, and in testing people, all sorts of things would show up. It would show up, for instance, the people perhaps who had a dependency on vitamin B3, which is niacin. Now, people who have a dependency on vitamin B3 and aren't getting it could be manic depressive. They could have all sorts of neurological issues. People who are schizophrenic. Whatever the condition, be it physical, mental, and what's the difference, whatever's wrong with somebody, what could cause any health deficit is either physical damage. You know, at some point you got hit by a truck, okay, you've got a health problem. Okay, let's say that wasn't the case. only two other reasons why anybody gets ill of anything. They're toxically poisoned with something, or they're nutrient deficient. So toxic poisoning happened from before we were born. Then we were maybe fed formula milk. We were told at school that we'd never amount to anything. We were toxically poisoned at a whole host of levels in a whole host of ways. Breathing, drinking water, bathing in chlorine, it's all toxic poisoning. So some of us are the canary in the coal mine. I took an antibiotic once and became type 1 diabetic and almost died. I was highly allergic to that dangerous drug. Could they have tested me for it? Well, people don't realize that there are biological tests where you take blood or whatever, and you can test somebody against a chemotherapy drug. Is my body going to really not like this? You can tell. Same with filling materials, biocompatibility tests. There are all sorts of tests to test you for what you might be allergic to. Some people are allergic to the most peculiar things. I'm informed by Dr. Russell Jaffe, who worked with the NIH, this hugely prestigious American body, for decades, that some people are allergic to foods like cucumber and radishes. How long, let's say you're allergic to something big time, well, maybe 10 minutes later you were vomiting, or an hour later you got a headache, or whatever, but cucumber and radishes, family, 4 days later. So you eat it on Saturday, now Thursday you're wondering, I'm just not feeling right. You're not going to put it down to the radishes you had, right? But turns out simple blood tests can spot hosts of things in advance, hosts of things. And so if prevention was better than cure, which it obviously is, we would be saying to the farmers, we're no longer going to subsidize you to poison the land, poison the food with dangerous seeds. We're going to take all those subsidies away, and we're going to go back to natural. It's not about organic. It's about natural as opposed to poisoned, right? Normal agriculture is poisoned. So while that transition is yet to happen, and I'm confident it will at some point when the world wakes up, hang on, we don't want to be poisoned. In the meantime, we've got to supplement. So a really good multi-mineral is a way to go. Do I take a really good multi-mineral? No, I don't. Why not? Because I go out and forage, right? I'm lucky. I'm living in the country. Earlier on in the year, I had blackberries, stuffed myself in blackberries. I've used rose hips. Right now, I've got nettles, stingy nettles outside in abundance. I'm going to pick the top 6 leaves or so, and I'm going to put them in the food processor with some garlic and lots of really nice olive oil and some nuts, maybe a few seeds, some salt, pepper, a bit of cayenne maybe, and I'm going to whiz them up into a mush, and now I'm going to have nettle pesto, right? It's wild, it's growing in the wild, it's not land that's been poisoned. It's real food. Nettles have the highest silica. Nettles are full of minerals. They couldn't be fuller. It's like one of the top foods out, along with black cherries, right? Nettles, black cherries, kelp, seaweed, top foods, right? You want nutrition, you want B vitamins, there's yeast, nutritional yeast, brewer's yeast, there's bee pollen. There are so many concentrated fabulous foods that you can get from the forest, right? I can buy bee pollen that comes from the forests of Romania. So the bees it's not honey like from down the road, which is they're eating poisoned rapeseed or something. These bees are eating real food, like our ancestors recognized as honey. So bee pollen, honey, the real food that's still from the wild, that's what we can be doing instead of supplements. And it is available, you just have to look hard. Often honey will say raw forest honey, right? And that's what you want. You don't want the stuff that doesn't say raw and forest or something, not really. So it's getting to know where the good produce is. And I mean, I only buy organic, so going to the supermarket is easy. I know where all the organic stuff is, and I'm not weighed down with, which do I choose, right? It does make life a lot simpler. And, I encourage people to get a health consultation from somebody who knows what they're doing, and go through what they're doing in their lives. Are they still using this shampoo that's actually giving them blood poisoning? Are they, using washing up liquid? What are they doing in their lives that actually they're poisoning themselves? They just haven't quite woken up yet. So the purpose of this series, I hope, is to wake people up. Actually, it's not difficult. 5 years to become a doctor is so bloody difficult. But to understand your own health, they should be teaching most of this at school. It should be obvious.
Yeah. And then final question. I think when you can buy things over counter pretty easily, I think people think they're safe. But as you said off camera, there's some supplements and some things that people look at that actually can be quite dangerous if used poorly. Is there any keys that people should look out for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go into the petrol station. Notice that the water costs more than the petrol per litre, and then notice all the drugs they're selling. There's ibuprofen, there's paracetamol and so on, and they're really cheap, like 30p or something, just ridiculously cheap often for ibuprofen, Nurofen, whatever. Well, Nurofen's expensive because it's got the brand label, it's still the same stuff basically. And is there a danger of ibuprofen and paracetamol? It's huge. It's hugely dangerous. You know, I think most people know that too many paracetamol and you can get kidney damage and die. You know, only about 8 or some ridiculously tiny number. They'd never be passed today. But ibuprofen is causing all sorts of problems. If a woman's got a child and they don't want any problems with autism, they need to avoid any artificial product, whether it's a vaccination, look at the ingredients, or whether it's ibuprofen. A lot of proof that ibuprofen is very, very dangerous, not only from children's perspective, there's a lot of proof now it's stopping empathy, all sorts of off-the-wall things that none of them that you want. You know, you can deal with pain naturally, right? It's not so hard. Turmeric with black pepper, curcumin, CBD. There are so many things. The violet rays, the pain genie. There are devices. There are so many things that will turn pain off. One of the best ones is to get rid of the inflammatory problems that are doing it in the first place. You know, my approach is to do myself out of a job, in that I don't want to see a client twice, ideally. Yeah, I will, but what I want to do is try and explain, this is what your ancestors did, this is what you're doing, stop doing some of what you're doing, do more of what your ancestors did, and here's where to find that food, here's how to grow it yourself, get the old varieties, heritage seeds they call them. Everybody should be growing food if they possibly can, even if a balcony is all they've got, anything. And try and be as self-sufficient as possible and teach kids how to grow food. Because, suddenly, I remember in the 70s there was this petrol strike, and suddenly there's no petrol, and people were wondering what they were going to do about food. Nobody knows how to grow it themselves. There's a fantastic film about Cuba where, about 1990, they realized that the last boat from Russia, from the Soviet Union, with oil was coming, the very last boat. This is the fall of the Soviet Union. Cuba was being embargoed fuel by America and people, and they realized that they had about 12 weeks before they ran out of diesel, which would mean there was no way to work the tractors on the land. There'd be no way to get the produce that they'd grown from the land into Havana, or any other city for that matter. They had 12 weeks warning. They ripped up all the pavements in the cities, started growing food, right? They were never going to grow enough food in 12 weeks, but they had no choice. They realized what was coming. Absolute, full on, they had to grow food. So on average, every Cuban lost about 20 pounds in weight over that next year. There wasn't enough food. And the Americans were embargoing what food other people would have allowed in that they could have bought. It was a horrendous situation. And the film is called Power of Community. And it's really worth watching the film Power of Community to watch how they did it. How did they go from oil dependent to organic permaculture in some places? They had no choice but to go natural, and they did it. And we need to do the same, but preferably before a panic. I think the best profession these days for a school leaver could be learning not how to farm, but how to garden. Because our ancestors had gardens, the kitchen garden. And what would happen was they'd make dinner, lunch, they'd cook it on wood fire. When the ashes had cooled down, they'd take the wood ashes and sprinkle it all over the vegetables and stuff. Doesn't matter whether you're on a desert island or wherever you are, that was what happened. The ashes got spread back so that the trees, the trees mined the minerals with their roots, then brought it up to the surface, and then in autumn, in fall, spread all the leaves all around the small field, and remineralizing it. So you took the minerals out with the crops, you put it back with the leaves. And then to double it, you burnt the trees for lunch, and then you breathed in the charcoal dust and you sprinkled the ash to remineralize the soil. Perfect cycle. But the moment the electric oven, the gas oven and so on came out, they broke the traditional cycle of nutrition. So one way or another, we have to supplement unless we're lucky enough to get real wild food. So supplementation, I would think 95% of all the supplement companies in the world have been now bought out by the bad guys. All right? Holland and Barrett was owned by the Carlyle group, who are into arms dealing.
Al Gore's got some involvement there as well, hasn't he? Holland and Barrett, I think.
I don't know. It recently got sold to the Russians, so I think things have changed. Solgar, Britain's biggest manufacturer of health products, owned by the Carlyle Group. Puritan's Pride, Nature's Best. You know, there are lots of companies who they have no interest in getting you well. That doesn't suit their financial purpose. You know, they're not there for your benefit. They're a corporation. They're there to make money. Making profits should be taken away from making people healthy. You know, where is the incentive for a doctor these days to make sure that prevention and stopping disease is their primary? Back in about 2005, the government in the UK changed the rules that doctors got paid more. The more people they diagnosed, the more they got paid. And the rate of diagnoses went up 80% or something that year, as doctors suddenly realized the more people who are ill, the better. Then let's take the private doctor. Now, these patients come in, and the doctor's not sure what the disease is. And they've done lots of experiments. They've taken somebody with a known disease, presented them to 10 doctors, and lots of the doctors don't even agree what the person's got, even though it's known. So we go to the first doctor and they say, you've got this. Well, have I? Shouldn't you get a second opinion, a third opinion? If you're buying a new sofa, you'd shop around, but people take the first opinion of a medical doctor who's only basically knows about drugs. So what if they taught prevention? What if we practiced it? There'd be so little disease. So what would we need to take? Vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium, selenium, a really good multi-mineral, fulvic minerals for the trace elements, Celtic salt, real raw grey salt, not pink salt, drink pure water. I probably missed a couple out. Charcoal can be great for detoxification. We're self-repairing. They don't teach doctors the art that we all have to self-repair. It's a subject they don't teach. We are self-repairing. So if the only reasons we get ill are toxic poisoning, physical accident, or nutrient deficiency, then surely all we've got to do is get rid of the nutrients, try and repair the physical damage if there is some, get the toxins out, the nutrients in, and the job's done, because we are self-repairing, right? But doctors override self-repair. They say, well, I'm going to give you this chemotherapy drug which will turn off your immune system, and while your immune system's turned off, these drugs will do these other things. Well, hang on, we need an immune system. You know, so I don't believe that turning off your immune system can really be a very good idea. Yes, if you just had a kidney transplant, well, you've got no choice but to turn off the immune system, otherwise it will reject it, because it's a foreign thing. Bodies do that. You know, we think we do something, and you know, somebody eats a donut and they know they're not meant to eat a donut. They think, well, 24 hours time, that'll be fine. Donut will be out of my system. Everything's great. But in reality, every decision you make has long-term consequences, right? It may seem like it's over, but it's not really. You did a little bit of damage, and that damage doesn't go away. And a really good example of that is mercury. Let's say somebody's got a mercury filling, or they eat some very old fish like a tuna that's maybe got too much mercury in it. So let's say they brush their teeth, they eat the tuna, 1 atom of mercury comes off and goes into the bloodstream. Now the first cell it comes across it will kill, then the second one, then the third one, and every time it kills a cell, is the mercury in any way weakened? Nope. It'll carry on until you've excreted it. You might be able to get it out in your hair, you might poop it out, you might pee it out, you might sweat it out. But let's say you're bad at excreting heavy toxic metals, So dentists, who just like oncologists have the monopoly on working on your teeth, are paid by the government with your money to put mercury fillings into babies' mouths. How can this be sensible?